Welcome. If you're just joining us, you're at the Ask the Expert session from Nonprofit Hub. And today we are joined by Jill Silman Chapman. I'm sure she'll be coming on screen here in just a second. So Jill is a senior performance consultant with Insperity Traditional Employment Solutions. And she's got quite the roster of credentials here. So I am going to have to read it off the sheet. So she holds degrees from the University of Texas at Austin, Tarleton State University, and she has the SPHR and SHRM-CSP certifications. Jill, we don't know what those are, but we trust they are extremely valuable and important. She also has more years experience in HR and recruiting than she shares to talk about. So,
Right. The gray
Jill,
hair comes naturally.
welcome. Welcome to the session. Really popular topic for our audience. So we're grateful to have you.
Well, I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for the time. Yes, right now is the time to be talking about these sorts of things as we're moving out of the pandemic world and into whatever the new next looks like. There's just a lot of moving parts, and one of those is our staff, right? And the folks that work with us. They're calling this time either the Great Resignation. I've heard people refer to it that way. I've heard people talking about a turnover tsunami, but just meaning that there's a lot that's going to be going on with our employees. So what we want to hope to talk about today is number one, how can we attract people to our organization, but even more importantly, how can we keep them here once they get here? Because it's no good just to bring them in the front door if they're going out the back door, right? So hopefully today we can gen up some questions that you guys can ask, that we can talk about this post-pandemic hiring, and then keeping the employees, because it's always a challenge for MPOs, right? This isn't anything new, but maybe it's going to be exacerbated with some of what's going on around us. So I think the best offense is a good defense, or however they say that. And so the more that we can prepare in times when maybe we're not feeling it yet, the better off we're going to be in the future. I think, the big hiring challenges that I've always heard when I talk to our nonprofit clients at Insperity, when I talk to those nonprofits for whom I sit on their board and that sort of thing, it's always about hiring people with limited budget constraints, right? That's the biggie. Just finding the qualified staff is another thing, and then finding that time to be able to devote to recruiting and interviewing, because I think that because resources are scarce, a lot of times when I work with nonprofits, they'll almost just kind of scrape the bottom and take what they can get because they don't have the time, they don't have the resources, and they settle, right? And I'm going to propose to you guys that we flip the script a little bit, and that we spend some time thinking about the infrastructure that we're building into our organization for recruiting and retention, especially at a time maybe you don't need it just right this very moment. So this is a great time to invest, to build that infrastructure, build those policies, practices, the process that you want to use for hiring and keeping people into your organization, so that when it's time to go, you can just flip a script, right? Like you just say, okay, I'm ready, or flip a switch, not a script, but you can say, I'm ready to go, and everything is ready for you. Um, and that includes really working with your hiring managers, because who else is more invested in making the right hire? But yet these are the people often that are under the gun. They've got a lot going on. They don't have the time or the energy, or maybe they have the wrong attitude around what it means to bring in the best talent. And so in the off time, I think it's really good to work with our hiring managers to make sure that they're on the same page with us, and they understand that the investment of time is going to pay off in the future, right? Because who wants to keep doing this like a hamster on a wheel, right? You want to get it right, and the cost of turnover is exorbitant, right? I've heard 15 times in hard costs an annual salary. We just said resources are scarce, right? So definitely, we don't want to spend money that we don't need to for this, I guess. So I'm ready for questions, you guys. Like, let's talk. Let's have questions.
If you do have questions, feel free to throw them into the chat or the Q&A. I do have some that we've received from audience members just off of our email list leading up to this. So the promotional language we used for this event used those terms you mentioned: turnover tsunami, the Great Recession of 2021. What brought
Mhm.
all the, I mean, we know COVID happened, but
Right,
what's
right.
happening? What's causing the mass exodus?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things to think about. One is just the pent-up demand, right? There was unprecedented job churn before the pandemic hit. So people were leaving their jobs a lot before the pandemic. And then COVID. And so people kind of held on to whatever they were doing, right? If they went home and to work, then that was great, but they were going to hold on to that. They weren't going to make some, radical changes in this, time of uncertainty. Um, and so there's just pent up demand for 18 months or whatever. They've been thinking about that job search that maybe they started back in 2019. And so they're ready to go ahead and move forward with that. The fact that we have so many jobs that are coming available every single month, I think in March, 900,000 new jobs were advertised in the month of March alone. So there's much more opportunity, right? And so it's just that perfect storm, right? And timing is everything. And even those that maybe weren't thinking about making a move a year and a half ago or whatever have worked through this pandemic, and maybe their organization didn't handle things the way that they wish that the organization would have handled. And so that's coming into play. Maybe the organization is talking about coming back to work. And in all the polls that I've read, more than 50% of the workforce wants to stay home post pandemic. But everything I'm reading is more than 70% of the employers are either coming back to work full time in the workplace, or they're going to come up with some sort of hybrid. So there's a bit of a mismatch there, right? And I think the way that organizations are going to handle the flexibility moving forward into the future is also reason for people to make some changes. And quite frankly, number one reason why people leave, their manager, and we found that with the pandemic, you saw two kinds of managers evolve when we all went home to work for the 2 weeks to slow the spread or whatever. But we saw a phenomenon happen, and we had managers that were just too much in people's stuff, right? Too much of the micromanaging and just too on all the time for the comfort level for their employees. And then to the other end of the spectrum, we had these managers who were missing in action. They might have been missing in action when we were actually in the workplace, but we knew where they were, right? They were down the hall. We could get to them, and maybe we didn't interact with them all the time. But when we went remote and we couldn't find them, then that leads to all sorts of anxiety on the part of an employee. So how people handled the management skills during the pandemic probably has something to do with some of these folks that are looking for new opportunity. So it's the same as it always was, even without the pandemic. But I think a couple of things have exacerbated the problem, right? The way the managers reacted and what's next, the flexibility, the work from home, um, the communication and trust. And another thing that I've heard a lot about is culture, and how a lot of organizations lost some sense of their culture in this remote work environment, and that's important, and maybe some things, maybe they didn't communicate as well as they could have, or as often as they could have. Maybe they lost some transparency that the employees had come to expect, and so that creates an opportunity for them to say, yeah, maybe this isn't the right place for me going forward.
So let's kind of dig deeper into that, because one of the other questions I had come in was about culture and the remote environment.
Hmm.
So how do we keep connection with our team, keep conversations going? What tools do you see people using?
Hmm.
How
Yeah,
do
it's
nonprofits?
hard, right? Because you have to be so intentional on Zoom. It's not like you can pass somebody at the coffee pot, right? Or walking down the hallway or in the elevator and have opportunity for interaction with other people. You have to reach out. You have to schedule a time, to everybody's got to jump on the Zoom or the Teams or whatever tools that you might be using. I saw, even within our own organization, the use of Zoom. grew exponentially. The use of Teams also was just massive. That movement to Teams. I've heard other organizations talk about Slack. And there's a number of free tools that are available out there. You don't get all the bells and whistles, but probably enough for some collaboration and conversation. We saw people try to do all sorts of different things to keep that culture, keep those opportunities alive. And what is culture, really, right? But it's the people. It's not the bricks and mortar, right? The building doesn't create culture. It's the people that create the culture. So if we saw people change the way that they operate a lot, then you started to see some culture crumble. But for those organizations that made a concerted effort to do things the way that they always did them, just change them to a virtual platform, we didn't see as much. We didn't see so much of that change. So there was clever stuff that started to happen, the online happy hours and the, let's all do a paint by numbers and we're on the video doing it and that sort of thing. And that's cool, but that's not culture either, right? That's an opportunity to get together and maybe a purposeful reason to get together. But it's how people relate to each other. It's how we live out our values. That's what culture is. So we had to hang on to those things through the pandemic.
That makes sense. That definitely
Did I
makes
answer that question?
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know.
I
Okay.
think so, and it's a tough question. I feel like with a lot of this, none of us knows because none of us has been through this before.
Right. Right.
But your expertise is definitely on point. So I had a question come in here. I'm going to keep this one confidential. I'm working with an employee who needs to be in the office more than she is. She continues to give me reasons why she needs to be working from home in order to concentrate, not feeling well, etc. My suspicion is that COVID has really affected her anxiety level, and some of her responsibilities really dictate her being here with the team. I've been very flexible with her in that the last few months, but I can tell you it's starting to affect other team members' connection to her and the perception of her as a team member. How can I respect her but still give her the parameters that are best for the team?
Right.
Oh, that is a representative question. I think that is something we're all kind of dealing with.
Right. And we're all going to struggle with this probably for the next 6 to 8 months as things start to open up and the expectations start to change. I think this, along with every other recommendation I can make, it's all around communication, right? There's not going to be one size fits all answer to how we go back to work. And we're going to have to take very individual approaches because COVID affected everybody so personally. You have every end of the spectrum, whether people were, um, on total lockdown and the anxiety and the fear, and then you had other people who thought, whatever. So we're dealing with all of those kinds of emotions and all those kinds of thought processes with all of our employees. So in this particular case, I think you're right to be flexible and to err on the side of generosity, but you've begun to see what happens when you do that. And I think it's going to take just honest communication with the individual. I sense that you're hesitant to come back into the office. I hear that from you. But let's look at this logically. Let's look at what not coming into the office is doing for the performance of the team, for the performance of the organization, blah blah blah. But kind of building in the why and really articulating the why behind the responsibility to get them that individual to see what's going on, with that hesitancy. It may get to a point where you have to say, yeah, I get that that's important to the team, but I'm more important than the team and I'm going to have to leave, right? But that's okay. Um, then you know what you're dealing with. But I think just to have an honest conversation about this is the impact, um, and so that they can see all sides of it. Because sometimes when you're doing a lot of navel gazing, you can't really see what you're doing to the other people. So sometimes just being jolted into that moment to understand the impact can be very beneficial. So just that interactive process, how can we do this? How can we build this together? How can we work forward is going to be critical, but it's all around that communication piece and and being, and telling the ugly truth that, hey, this is going to impact your personal brand as much as it is our nonprofit brand if we're not providing the services and the things that whatever that role does, right?
Mhm. I love that you come at it from the angle of impact because one thing nonprofits all should have in common is we're serving a purpose greater than ourselves. So
Mhm.
if that individual hears that they're having a negative impact on their mission, purpose, it just makes that conversation easier, I would think.
Yeah,
Um,
it kind of takes it out of the us versus them, and
mhm.
or you versus your coworker. It takes names and and individuals out of it, and it really does kind of elevate the conversation.
And she just responded, thank you, very helpful. So
Good.
beautiful. Guys, again, if you have questions, throw them into the chat. I see I have a couple in the Q&A. Our organization is volunteer run. What suggestions would you make to attract skilled volunteers for long-term services?
Okay, so do the very first part of that question again.
So they're a volunteer run organization and
Mhm.
they want to attract skilled volunteers for long-term, I think long-term positions.
Okay. So we've got a volunteer base. We have people that are working for us, but we're missing some pieces and parts that probably would help the organization to run better, right? And I think it's just the same way you would do it, whether you were paying the individuals or not paying the volunteers or not. It's always be networking, right? It's always be talking to people. And when you see people who demonstrate those particular skills, not sure what those skills are, but let's think about where people might gather that have those same set of skills, right? If it's an organizational type thing, maybe they're on Facebook group pages, right, about organization and they like that OCD kind of stuff, and so maybe we're hanging out in places where people who hold those kinds of skills live. And then we're softly talking about what it is that we do when we get people encouraged by our passion and our excitement for the mission. And you start to identify other people who can catch that vision, right? Who can catch that passion, and that's how you find the people. But it's recruiting, whether they're volunteers or regular employees, you never turn it off, right? You don't stop for recruiting. It's sort of like, any of us that have sales backgrounds, always be selling, always be recruiting, right? You're always looking. Even if you think you don't need them, you keep those people tethered to you in some form or fashion. Maybe you have a Facebook page and you start watching who's engaging with you. And I'm saying Facebook, and it seems like old technology to me at this point. Maybe have an Instagram, and you're seeing who's engaging with you, and you stay tethered to those people so that when you do need them, you know how to get a hold of them. But you're always making those connections. But go where the people who have those skills that you're missing, go where those people are hanging out, whether it's online or in real life.
I used to run a human service organization, and I think most of our career volunteers, and when I say career, I'm thinking like 3 to 5 years, because I think people shift their volunteer work as often as professionals shift their careers. But service organizations, Kiwanis, ELP, civic organizations like that are a gold mine of volunteers. They
No
do
doubt. And they're always looking for somebody to come and give a presentation, right? So get in front of them with your, develop
notary.
some sort of, yeah, and be their guest speaker for the month. And you'll be surprised at how many people that you might be able to identify.
Absolutely. Okay, so more questions have come in. If an individual is hesitant to return to work, but you hear that they are attending a large function outside the workplace, can you bring that up?
Yeah. So, couple of things there. Yeah, some people are just they're going to say in their head, I'm as productive at home as I was in the office. Why in the heck do I have to go back to the office? This is more convenient for me, easier to roll out of bed, walk down the hall than it is to commute, to do all these sorts of things. Um, there's some people who may have perhaps some safety concerns. Now, if I'm going to large functions, it's probably not me, but there may be some sense of a safety concern if your organization maybe isn't doing what they think the organization should be doing inside, keeping surfaces clean, having air purification, whatever those things might be that would make somebody feel a little bit more comfortable. There could be an element of that. I don't know. It seems weird that they'd be going to the big events if that was really critical to them. But I think a conversation is warranted. Uh, to say a little concerned that this is happening, and we probably need to come to some agreement, some resolution about how we're going to come back to the workplace. Um, and if that's important to you, just kind of lay it out there and say, let's work together to try to make this work for both of us. My best guess, like knee jerk reaction to this is, yeah, this person's found some comfort in working from home and doesn't want to deal with the commute. And you need to think about it, like, do they have to come in every single day? I kind of see us moving to a future in which we go to the office when we need to collaborate. And when we have heads down work, we're probably working from home, that we can do things that are less interrupted and that sort of thing. And I think that's going to be the um, kind of the way that we approach our work, especially if we're given the authority as employees to think about, do I come in today? Do I not come in? I think that's what's going to be the decision maker is, do I need to collaborate, or is this a project that I need my full attention?
Two organizations I work pretty closely with have both, for their leadership levels, switched to a hybrid model. And the feedback has just been amazing. I
Right.
think people appreciate the time with their families. They are more focused, and productivity goes up when you don't have to commute.
Hmm.
Um, you don't even have to get ready sometimes.
Right.
It's a beautiful thing.
Right, right, and I think we've all learned to appreciate that, and that's gonna be hard to give up. But then there's certain people like me who want the energy that I get from being with other people, and I need that sort of thing every once in a while. But do I want to go every day? Yeah, not even me. I want that flexibility.
Definitely. So a question that's a throwback to something you touched on earlier, but
Hmm.
the two different management kind of reactions to
Hmm.
COVID. And this person's asking, what is the best approach to let managers know they are missing an action, and what suggestions can be made to
Right. So largely you're going to have, if you have an MIA manager, you're going to have, you may have already some departures from the employees because they just can't work in that kind of environment. You are definitely going to see probably some lower performance of their team. And I think it's a conversation that you have. How often are you checking in? How are you doing? What is your management style now that we're in this remote situation? And if they are not holding the regular one-on-ones, or they're they're they can't articulate the last time that they met with somebody on their team, then I think that that's an opportunity for you to work on a development plan that says communication is everything, right? I'm telling you, if I one word you walk away from is communicate. 'Cause think about every relationship that we have, personal relationship, business relationship. When it falls apart, it's expectations unmet. Expectations come from communications, right? So if we're not communicating, people in the absence of information start to make things up. If I can't find my manager, then I'm beginning to think she doesn't care about me anymore. She doesn't. I'm on the chopping block, and she's too hesitant to be able to talk to me. She doesn't want to face me because I'm probably the next one that's going to get the axe or something like that. And they start making crazy stuff up, and they always make up worse than what the reality is. But maybe if you can demonstrate that sort of thing to that missing in action manager of, here's the effect of this. This is what happens when you do this. They don't want that. I don't think. And maybe they're so busy doing their thing, they just think, oh, if somebody needs me, they'll reach out, and they're not reaching out because they can't. When they do reach out, you don't respond very quickly or something like that. Um, and so I think just demonstrating the shoe on the other foot. We tend to do things the way that we want things done to us, right? So I'm probably one of those that could go days, weeks, months without talking to my manager about anything. I don't need regular one-on-ones because I don't really like doing that with any of the people, my direct reports. But over time, I've had to learn it doesn't matter what I want, right? It matters what the individual wants. And that's what a manager's for, right? We hire people to do the jobs. The managers are there to remove the obstacles so that the jobs can get done. That's our job as managers. So being able to reiterate that and to say, you know, yes, you have some responsibilities, you have some things to get done, but your first responsibility are to your direct reports. That's just the way it goes. And so again, communicating with them so they'll communicate with the others. I hope
I
I
love
answered.
it. You said something that I say all the time, mostly to my husband, but I write fiction when I don't know in my head. And
Hmm.
what you said, in the absence of communication, I mean, we make up stories, and a lot of
Hmm.
times they're really bad fiction.
Right.
Um, it's yeah, profound point. Okay, so next question. Our organization grew from 1.5 employees to 2 full-time and 2 part-time employees in the last year. Congrats.
Yay.
Yeah. Our growth and service to the community will still justify this many staff. How how to keep them engaged while educating the board on the necessity to pay them more in order to keep them. Need advice on how to sync the board with the increased funding needs in order to fulfill our nonprofit mission.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a common one.
Yeah. And money is important, right? It's important, especially in light of the possibility that they could be cherry picked for something else, right? Because of a little bit more money. And so money makes the world go round. That's why we do most things. But money only goes so far in keeping an engaged employee. It will get them there. They want to feel like they are fairly paid. But beyond the fairness quotient, it's everything else that's going to keep that individual engaged. So if you're paying well below market rate for a similar sized organization, a similar type mission, then that is something that you want to talk to your board about. It's always about making that business case, right? So, you know, show them the return on investment. If we do this, this is what will happen. Use some of the, do some research on this whole turnover tsunami and the Great Resignation and all that. Throw in some of those statistics. And here's a statistic. I think it's up to 52%. There's all these different surveys out there, but the biggest one I saw was that 52% of the workforce is looking to make a move. The reality is, it's easier to say I want to leave than actually leave, right? So the predictions are around 30% of the workforce is voluntarily going to leave during this time. But talk about that. So, let's say that there's okay, you got 4 people now, right? What if 2 of them left? You just added the 2. What if they left? You needed them when they came. So what does that look like? So paint the picture for what it looks like if they go. Paint the picture for what you can do, how much more you can do if they stay, at least to get them up to fair wages. And then start thinking about all those other engagement drivers. What keeps people engaged? It's a feeling of purpose, right? That they understand that they're moving the needle for the organization. If somebody doesn't have a line of sight to what they're doing and how it impacts, then that's a problem. So being able to demonstrate to them how they're moving the needle for the organization, this is the employees, right? And then also you want to take a look at how you could further develop them because not only they want to see the organization move, but they want to see themselves move. Doesn't mean more money or a lofty title or anything like that. They just want to grow, right? People want to grow. They want to be better tomorrow than they were yesterday. So if you can show them how you're investing in them, right, and helping them to develop, those are the main drivers. Once you handle the fairness of wages, then it's all about making a difference and then making a difference in my own self as well.
I love, I think that's a major, major takeaway, guys. Write that down. Move the needle. You want to
Mhm.
help your team see how they are helping you, the organization, be successful. I mean, who doesn't want that? That's
Right.
all about working for purpose. Great, great answer. Okay, next question. How could, this is a great one too. How can we instill culture in a nonprofit run by volunteers when the people instill the culture, but they're not invested? How do we
Mm.
retain volunteers and bring back culture?
Yeah. So again, And culture starts at the top, right? So, yes, volunteer organization, but then you've probably got some hierarchy there, right? Of the volunteers. And so, those that are in the leadership positions are the ones that are going to walk out this culture. And if we don't see visible signs of the culture in those people, then I'm not going to, you know, it's not important to me either, then, right? So, it's going to be paramount that the leaders of the organization are so visible in doing those things that support the values of the organization. That's what's driving the culture, right? So making sure that they're, you know, almost overdoing it, right? So it can be demonstrative and so people get it. And then they want to get on board too, because that sort of stuff can be contagious, especially around the idea of somebody who volunteers, right? If I'm volunteering, unless it's court mandated volunteerism, I'm probably excited to be there, right? I wanted to be there. There was something that drew me here. This is my free time, and I'm using it on your behalf. So I surely I can get excited about some things, but it's going to have to permeate from the top down, right? It starts at the top. And if I don't see people doing it at the top, I'm not going to bother. So that's probably the best thing that you can do as leaders is to overdo it until you can get people that are feel like they're more in sync.
More of this do as I say, not as I do kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have a two-part question. And first she says, thank you. This has been super helpful. So,
Great.
the first question, do you have any tips for attracting initial board members for a startup nonprofit? She's already taken care of a lot of the groundwork, including securing the 501c3 status, business plan, etc. And she feels like she can leverage that for quality members. Any tips?
Yeah. So, most of the boards that I have been that I've seen successful, right, is that very purposefully handpicked kinds of folks for the expertise that they can lend um, to the organization. So, I mean, the board makeup, you guys already know all this kind of thing. So you need that person who's a money kind of person, a numbers kind of person who can oversee that part of the organization. You need the person that's the people kind of person. So you need somebody that maybe has a bit of an HR background. Maybe you're not at the point where you're going to hire other employees, but you need to set yourself up and be ready for that time as you begin to scale the organization. So I would definitely be looking for people who have the skill sets to make up a board that looks a lot like the management organization of a company, right? You got somebody who's legally oriented, you got somebody who's financially oriented, people oriented, all those pieces and parts that go into creating a company would be the kinds of folks that I would be looking for to add to my board because you just need their insights. And while you may have the passion to want to kick this uh, uh, venture off, off, but we all have to understand that we don't know it all. We can't do it all. So definitely picking those kinds of skills that you don't have or that you need to kind of complement one another. Then again, it's sort of like that always be recruited. Start hanging out where those kind of people hang out, right? Look at those people who are successful within their careers. And again, to the point that Katie made earlier about going to service organizations, who works in service organizations? Like what do those people do? Most of them are either business owners or they're managers within their organizations and leaders within their organizations. So those might be great places to find some volunteers. A lot of times, communities, I know a lot of communities have these. I was part of it, a leadership um, development kind of thing that lasts 8 months, 9 months, something like that. Those are great. Those are people who have said, and they paid money to say, I want to invest in my community. I want to invest in these things, and I want to grow into this. So maybe looking at those rosters, who's gone through those leadership development programs within your community, because they're probably hungry for an opportunity, and you can find a right match maybe there.
That is an excellent suggestion. I know in our community it's called Leadership Connect, and I think they're
Mhm.
usually tied to chambers of commerce.
Right. Hmm.
So a great place to start. One other tip on that, this is something I've done because I've asked a lot of people to join boards and I've gotten no's. I've probably gotten no's more than I've gotten yeses.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, people always think of it in terms of what will be expected of them, and time and money are the two things people are
Right.
most hesitant to give. Jacob, one thing I always do is I always ask them, who else do you know like you? 'Cause we want you, but beyond you, we'll go for your network. And what this does is it gives you a warm introduction. So maybe you don't get the person that you reached out to initially, but they will then bring you into their network and introduce you to other great candidates.
And I think also kind of setting your expectations for what you're going to get from these board members. And I've always found my most successful boards, a third of them give me more money than they give me time. A third of them give me more time than they give me money. And a third of them are kind of a high, like a mix, like a little money, a little time, right? And if I go into the board with that expectation, like, this person's going to be a great resource when I have questions and all that sort of stuff. Great, will show up at every event, be there from the start to the end. And you need that, right?
Yeah.
Some people, I need you so I can get to the money, right? Like I need, and so going in with that expectation of what people are supposed to be doing for you, is also helpful.
And don't underestimate those networkers. So think about it. One big giver is sometimes not as valuable as one person who will talk to 20 big givers.
Right.
So networkers are highly valuable. He says awesome tips. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, second part of that question, and this is interesting one. Is servant leadership best for employees slash volunteer retention?
I'm going to say yes because that is, a cornerstone of my own organization. And, um, every month we're celebrating people with 30 years service, 25 years service. Um, it works, right? Um, Attitude is everything. And people, what is it that Maya Angelou said? Like people will,
They
like they'll forget what you say, they'll forget what you did, but they'll always remember how you made them feel. And I
yeah,
think that that's part of what servant leadership is all about. How are you making the people feel? Are you making them feel appreciated? Are you making them feel welcome? Are you making them feel like their opinion matters? All those sorts of things that when you take that approach, that you're almost leading from the rear, right? That you empower them, that you trust them to do the right things. That trust, that transparency, and all the things that go around the ideas of servant leadership, I think, just imbue uh, that feeling that employees, people, volunteers, whatever, want to be part of that organization and want to do well.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, guys, we have about 15 more minutes. So if you have questions, throw them into the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to pull a couple that came in ahead of time. So health plans, high wages are not possible for my nonprofit. What unique benefits have you seen offered to attract and retain talent?
Right. And, I mean, clearly those things, there's a certain, those are hygiene factors, right? Benefits that's hygiene. That's like, okay, it is what it is. It fits my needs. It doesn't fit my needs. I'm going to move on. But once again, it's all about fairness, right? Once I've established that, oh, that sounds fair. Because I understand I can't get those, grandiose, benefits because this is a small organization. It's got 7 people, right? I understand that. Then it's about all these other things. And I think to be able to demonstrate to future employees how you deal with your current employees, is very, very telling. It's that brand that you're putting out there, right? Why would somebody want to work with you? Why would somebody want to come along? So identify those kinds of things and then market the heck out of that, right? Um, Go to your people who have been with you for a long time. Go to your most trusted volunteers. Why do they volunteer? Why do they stay? And then turn that into your branding message, right? And lead with that when you're going out to recruit, when you're going out to talk, when you're posting jobs, on job boards and that sort of thing. Lead with those reasons why people join your organization, because that's going to resonate with somebody else. So, and then and then on top of that, once you kind of attract them with that magnet, demonstrate um, how you value your employees, right? Demonstrate how you walk that stuff out. So being very, whether it's on a website and you're, having videos of things like that, or it's on your social media or whatever you can do to kind of demonstrate how you do that. Again, that whole moving the needle thing, demonstrate, tell people, show people, how can they progress the organization? How does this fit into the long-term plans of this organization? And what specifically does this do for the health of the organization? I think also to demonstrate that you have good leadership within your organization, however you can demonstrate that, because trust, transparency, good leadership, people want that, right? They want good management. So those are some things. And then some more tangible things, I think, um, maybe providing training certifications, things like that, that maybe don't cost the same as it might cost for, a flexible spending, insurance account or something like that. So training and development, that's also huge. Again, it speaks to how can I be better tomorrow than I was today. Maybe those things are a little bit more within reach. I've also seen some people use wellness initiatives as opposed to covering me when I'm sick, help me stay well, right? And so that might look like maybe you take a little unused corner and turn it into a yoga studio or something like that. And you take those kinds of breaks. Maybe you invest in an app that you can share with your employees, the Calm apps and some of those wellness type apps might be something to think about and not be so onerous on the budget. I think the other thing that we've already been talking about too is that flexibility, right? If you can provide flexibility for your employees, when they come to the office, when they don't, how they manage their time and their days, the more that you can help the employees to do that, I think is another benefit that will make you stand out from the pack.
Okay, so all good stuff. And the question or the answer to this question may be the same, but I just want to hear if there's any different perspective. So once we get those A players on our team, how do we keep them from leaving?
Yeah,
Especially in this highly competitive market. What are some
right.
things we can do to retain them?
You just do all these things that we keep talking about. Make them. They know they're A players. They know it. You know it. So do those. Talk to your A player and ask them what keeps you here and how can I make sure that you stay here. Right? It's a communication thing again. But really, I'm so surprised sometimes when I talk to managers and they don't know what incentivizes their own employees. They just think that everybody wants the same sorts of things that they want out of it. So sit down with them and talk to them and find out what it is. I had I'd given a talk somewhere and I had a guy come up afterwards and he told me a story because we had talked about this very thing about getting to know your employees and how critical that is, because everybody's got their story, everybody's got their stuff, right? Um, and he said that he had an A player who all of a sudden started showing up late for work, was a little bit rattled when she first got into work every morning, and it just wasn't the same person that he had that he knew, to be his employee. He didn't really do anything about it for the longest time. He just kind of allowed it to happen, but it's starting to bother him. It was starting to bother other people because she was showing up late, right? And so it was starting to have an impact. So he had to sit down with her. So he sat down with her, only to find out this employee runs marathons. Like, she's a marathon runner. That's her thing. And she had um, changed coaches or something, and it changed her workout patterns and it changed her thing. And she was trying like the devil to be able to get a workout in, get ready, get to work. But because it changed her times, it also changed the traffic patterns that she dealt with trying to get to work. Okay, easy fixes, right? Those are simple things to say, oh, I understand you have passions outside of work and the whole person comes to work. So let's talk about this. How could we make that a little bit easier on everybody? And then now, instead of giving her a gift card like to Amazon or something, when she does something good, he buys her like Hoka running shoes or something like that. But like, you know, he gets what is important to her now.
Yeah.
And it's completely changed their dynamic. But it took him sitting down and actually having a conversation going, what, you know, what are you all about when you're not here? And getting to know the employees. So hypos know that they're hypos, they know. And so doing what you can to talk to them to make sure that they know that you know that they're important and what matters to them matters to you.
I love that story. I think that's what we all just want to be seen and valued, and that's like
Mhm.
a perfect example. I love that.
Yeah.
So a little bit of a shift. I know of a nonprofit that recently developed a plan recognizing that their wages were not, I think their wages are market, but they're not like above market.
Mhm.
And so they developed almost like a shared goal when they reach their financial performance goals. The employees feel the benefit through bonuses and eventually through wage increases. How do you feel about that, especially
Mm.
in a situation where maybe not every employee can directly impact the, you know?
But they can. They can. Um, so I love it on a lot of different counts. Number one, I love bonuses because you're not strapped. You're not obligated for future years, right? We have another pandemic, something goes wrong. You haven't you haven't bitten off more than you can chew, you know, in the future. So I love bonuses. Love that idea. Um, Anybody read the book Four Disciplines of Execution? Don't know. Um, so I'm going to suggest that book. It's a little dry reading, but okay. But the point is this. These are some guys that were management consultants. It's Dr. Stephen Covey's son, Sean, and Jim Hewling and Mark McChesney. Anyway, they wrote this book because they were going out and having these conversations with their clients that would come down with all these lofty goals, right? Like, oh, we got 27 goals that we want to try to accomplish this year. Sounds great. Everybody kind of gets excited. They have the rah rah kickoff meeting. Everybody's excited. And then the real world starts to filter back in, right? They call it the whirlwind. And you just don't have the energy for 27 different things. And if you see other people not being invested in it, then where are you going to be invested? And then the whole thing, you know, 5 weeks later falls to, you know, just falls in the trash. So they came up with this idea that you pick one, maybe two, wildly important goals, and everybody is focused on those goals. And then you have this cadence of accountability, how you're demonstrating on a weekly, they suggest on a weekly basis, that you talk about that goal and what did everybody do? You have a little stand up, 15-minute stand up meeting. What did you do to try to, again, move the needle, right? What did you do? And did it work? Is it something you want to try again next week, or is this something? So it kind of takes that agile Scrum kind of mentality into goal setting. But anyway, that point about it's a financial goal, and I'm not a fundraiser, so how do I impact that? Well, guess what? Money comes in, needs to stay in the organization, right? So we can give it to the right people, not wasted on, you know, mm, fluorescent sticky notes, right? Like we can buy those ugly yellow ones, right? That's okay. So either you make money for the organization or you save money for the organization. That's the two reasons that we have anybody coming to join us, right? So you may not be in a role that brings money in, that you can see that you're bringing money in, but you can sure be in a role that keeps that money there, right? And is a good steward of those sorts of things. So being able to demonstrate either sides of that coin is important. So even your people who feel like, yeah, I don't bring. Let's say you have somebody who sits at a front desk or handles the phones and that sort of thing. Do you not think if they, if they are ugly or don't provide that level of customer service, that somebody's not going to call back, somebody's not going to, maybe a client's going to be turned off by opportunities. That's important too, that you're serving the right population and all that sort of thing. So everybody can figure out what they do, what they mean to that organization, and what it's going to mean to that goal. Maybe, yeah, maybe I'm not out there fundraising, but when you go out and fundraise, I'm going to make sure that we do the best thing with that money.
I love that. I love that. I see so many organizations referring to that front, the receptionist position
Mm-hmm.
as the first impressions too.
Right.
It really is. I mean, they are the welcome to the
Mm-hmm.
nonprofit, to the
Right.
cause. I love that. Great.
Yeah, they don't answer the phone fast enough. They don't do whatever they're supposed to do with with a smile in their voice. Yeah, you don't know what kind of missed opportunities are leaving the organization when you don't have that covered. So,
Sure, sure. And guys, we'll throw that book into the follow-up email for disciplines of execution. It reminds me a little bit. So we use EOS here at Nonprofit Hub, Entrepreneurial Operating System. It's a mouthful, but it's kind of the same thing, like setting goals that build towards one unified, bigger
that way
goal.
we're all rowing in the same direction, right?
Yeah,
And we don't get distracted by we have one goal, we have one focus, and then these other things are no longer distractions. And and they say, you know what your job is. You were hired to do a job, and these goals are sometimes superimposed over that. And if you just have one to worry about, you give 20% of your time to that, 80% to your regular stuff, and funny how things start to happen.
good math. Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, so one more question, and it's probably one that needs, it deserves its own session, but we're going to do what we can with it. Diversity.
Mhm.
How do we pursue recruitment? How do we connect with people when our own communities and maybe our own networks are not diverse?
Right. This is probably a $64,000 question, especially probably for the last 12 months that we've really been talking about that. Um, so there's a couple of things to think about. This is a long-term goal. It's not something that you can wiggle your nose and it's going to happen overnight, right? Because not only do you want to go and perhaps change the makeup of your client base, change the makeup of your server, your volunteers and your employees, but you also have to be prepared for what that's going to feel like when it starts to happen, right? We need to be real sensitive to these ideas of the onlys, and you have to be ready to be supportive when you've looked one way for forever and you're starting to bring in some diversity, that you have the support infrastructure to be able to handle that sort of thing, right? So this is a long-term objective. It's not a, oh, well, let me go advertise on a site that is focused on X, Y, or Z, right? It's building in that infrastructure first, building in your processes for recruiting that take the bias out of it. And there's a lot of things that you can do to try to prevent the bias in your hiring, and try to make your hiring as neutral as possible. That you open the funnel as wide as possible and have as many people flowing through that funnel to get to the end. They talk about two in a pool, and they talk about how the more diverse your candidate pool is at the top and as it goes through. But if you have a diverse finalist pool, you're going to be much more likely to bring in a diverse candidate than not. So there's a lot of conversation around that, but I'm going to advocate that you make sure that you're ready to make some of these changes, and that you have the support systems and everything in place before you just go willy-nilly saying, oh, I need one of these, or I need four of those, or whatnot, because that's not what it's about, right?
Yeah.
It's about that diversity of thought. It's about how that's going to change um, your entire organization, but it has to be a well thought out program. It can't be something that you just, slap a sticker on it and say that it's good.
Definitely. I would encourage everyone to definitely come to Cause Camp, but come to Cause Camp and hear Scott Welch speak. Scott Welch is a diversity consultant. I just got his book today, and he warned me it's like a comic book, which I think is just so cool. But it's 101 ways to enjoy the mosaic, creating a diverse community in your backyard, and it literally looks like a comic book inside. But I found it refreshing. I'm super intimidated by the topic, and I think a lot of people are. And
I think
so
so too.
getting some,
Mhm.
some fun expertise is appreciated.
Yeah,
And Jill, yours too. This has been amazing. And I think every person who asked a question is walking away really satisfied,
good.
which honestly doesn't always happen because we can't always like go as deep as we want to. And now the thank you messages are coming in.
Yeah,
But we appreciate your time. Guys, I will include links to Jill, to her company,
right.
to every resource that we mentioned in the follow-up email. So I would really encourage you to click through, connect with Jill one-on-one.
Absolutely. Love it. Would love to continue the conversation. So, yeah, reach out.
Wonderful. Okay, let's get back to doing more good.
Okay.
Thanks, Liz.
Thanks.